Pie in the Sky Media. This series contains adult language and descriptions of graphic violence throughout. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome back to Criminal Mischief with Carolyn and Brandon. You're listening to episode 194, Espionage. Reporter Ina Steiner hit the send button on her keyboard, something she'd done hundreds of times. It was August 1st, 2019. Ina's work centered around unbiased, independent journalism, which is so critical in a healthy democracy.
You put the investigation back months.
Yes, we know that. And if we're wrong, we're resigning. Were we wrong?
You'll have to find that out, won't you?
Listen, I'm tired of your chicken shit games. I don't want hints. I need to know what you know.
It was a Halderman operation. The whole business was run by Halderman, the money, everything. It won't be easy getting at him. He was insulated. You'll have to find out how. Mitchell started doing covert stuff before anyone else. The list is longer than anyone can imagine. It involves the entire U.S. intelligence community, FBI, CIA, Justice. It's incredible. Cover-up had little to do with Watergate. It was mainly to protect the covert operations. It leads everywhere. Get out your notebook. There's more.
That's a clip about Watergate. Because the thing is, Ina's reporting that day back in August of 2019, well, it triggered something. A malevolent plan.
We're going to do everything we can to take her down. Now's the time. Take her down. Burn her down. I want to see ashes. As long as it takes, whatever it takes, we have to stop her. That's what they said about a member of the press who was doing her job.
Powerful people with deep pockets were paying close attention to Ina's reporting.
One of those executives texted that he wanted to, quote, crush this lady, unquote, and another told Baugh, his subordinate, to, quote, take her down.
Alerts were attached to any content flagged as negative to the company, and Ina's latest piece fit the bill.
I've said before that federal law enforcement has a role to play when people attempt to weaponize the internet to terrorize and coerce others. And here, that was done to protect a corporation's brand.
Okay, I have to pause here for a second because given the name of the episode, Espionage, and the tease clip from one of my favorite movies of all time, All the President's Men, you can probably tell I'm a super fan actually, of spy movies and overly complicated noir thrillers with Byzantine plots featuring Moriarty-level anti-heroes, evil psychopathic villains, and unwinding complicated government conspiracies. The antidote, obviously, the intrepid reporter and her sources. So at this point, given my bias, in your mind's eye, I'm sure you're imagining our heroine in this week's story, Ina Steiner. Are you seeing her as someone who meets sources in darkened parking garages at midnight, looking over her shoulders as she walks home, then sitting down at her computer, snuffing out her cigarette in an ashtray overflowing with butts, and that somewhere in her cluttered but also sort of avant-garde and cool studio apartment, which also serves as her home office, surrounded by stacks of paper, presumably secret documents, dossiers she's expertly extracted from her shadowy sources. Because what Ina wrote, that article, did capture the attention of powerful men, and this piece wasn't the first. Do you imagine that she has a wall dedicated to her work? Pinned photos next to napkins scrawled with names and numbers. Of course, all of this detail also paints the larger picture that Ina is an outsider, a lone wolf reporter who will do anything to get her story. And without saying we know or intuit, she's got a painful backstory. She doesn't let people get too close because she's been hurt before. But there is this one detective, rakishly good-looking, who doesn't really care about such things, and yet somehow Ina always is able to find out where he is, and she just slinks up just as he's on his way to another crime scene. She knows where he is because of her contact in dispatch, the one she promises a coffee to. Because Ina needs confirmation on a story from this detective, who also happens to be a loner, who feigns annoyance when he sees her, that he's too busy, but after some flirtatious banter that showcases how she thinks and how they have this deeper connection, and that they can help each other out. At which point he gives her, begrudgingly, a critical breadcrumb, one she needs for her story. She walks away backwards, non-committal. Her expensive but scuffed leather satchel strap. The satchel itself belonged to her late father, who died under mysterious circumstances and whose murder is still unsolved. Well, this satchel is wrapped around her chest as she says, "So, I can quote you?" It's a question, but also an ambiguous, somewhat sexually charged riddle. The detective looks up, lifts one eyebrow, then shakes his head and says, "Steiner, don't make me regret this," as his brooding look has a depth he can't yet bring himself to reveal. A half smile that's also some kind of cloaked invitation. And in that fleeting moment, their eyes lock before she turns around and walks away. We feel better that Ina isn't exactly alone in this, that she's on to something, but it could get her killed. And yet, we know Ina will stop at nothing to get her story. So, if you're thinking this is going to be Ina's story, that this episode I've titled Espionage is going to deliver all the trappings of a twisty, highbrow crime drama featuring a broodingly beautiful, devastatingly capable, intrepid reporter who only stops long enough to put on deodorant and change her t-shirt in between dangerous, investigative reporting sandwiched between a jaded failure to launch romance with that detective? Well, this isn't that kind of story. But that doesn't mean it's any less psychologically fascinating, bizarre to the extreme, and absolutely terror-inducing. And once I get into it, you'll see, at least I hope, why I had to do that fictionalized intro, because the reality in this case is absolutely stranger than fiction. Okay, so Ina is a reporter, but her beat, well, let's just say it's not the stuff of a sexy crime thriller.
Harassment and intimidation against a middle-aged couple living in Natick, Massachusetts. That couple published an online newsletter that reviewed and was sometimes critical of eBay and other e-commerce companies.
Ina and her husband David built a quiet life in a suburb outside of Boston. They were living their dream. They worked from home, which was a place that they had scrimped and saved for, a fixer-upper they remodeled themselves. And side by side, they'd spent the last 20 years building a successful news website called EcommerceBytes. BYTES. David handled the business side of things, and Ina did the reporting via the online newsletter that features industry news and anything that impacts sellers on eBay.
For 20 years, I reported on e-commerce. In 1999, David and I started a publication called AuctionBytes, which is now EcommerceBytes. We helped small businesses sell online, and eBay tried to silence me with threats and intimidation. You would have to ask them what was so objectionable, but we don't hate eBay. Our readers sell on eBay and other platforms, and management was apparently thin-skinned.
Like I said, at first blush, the least sexy and dramatic reporting. And yet, it is because of Ina's reporting, which, unbeknownst to her at the time, had captured the unwanted attention of a powerful C-suite. And what happened next? Well, it's about as terrifying as any spy movie, albeit bizarre, to be sure, to the point of ridiculous if it weren't absolutely true. So let's get into the real story of intrepid reporter Ina Steiner. On August 1st, 2019, it was just another day for Ina doing what she does, publishing the latest news about eBay. And that day, she uploaded a piece to her e-commerce newsletter about a lawsuit eBay filed against Amazon for poaching its sellers. And that's when a steady stream of negative comments about eBay, with a special kind of vitriol directed straight at CEO Devin Wenig. Wenig had become the president and CEO of eBay in July of 2015. But here's the rub. The eBay community, especially longtime mom-and-pop sellers, they were highly critical of Wenig because they didn't like a series of eBay policy changes, which they felt personified executive greed at the expense of their community. Essentially, many felt that under Wenig's leadership, the company had turned their backs on the sellers who had actually helped build eBay. Wenig was also criticized for having a huge ego, that he prioritized Wall Street at the expense of the little guy instead of just being a good leader and fixing eBay's major problems, which there were many, and ones that Ina was reporting on. The biggest of which was that eBay was losing customers and market share. Her blog amplified eBay's declining revenues. In fact, since Wenig had become the CEO, the friction between him and the seller community had grown so intense that Ina and Steve's e-commerce newsletter was a place where eBay sellers posted about these grievances. So that's the backstory. Even so, it doesn't explain what would happen next. On that August 1st day in 2019, shortly after Ina published her latest article, which saying it struck a nerve would be an understatement. eBay CEO Devin Wenig was obsessed with news coverage about the company and his performance. In fact, he closely monitored all press, and 30 minutes after Ina had published her article, Wenig texted eBay's chief communications officer, Steve Weimer, saying, "Ina is out with a hot piece on the litigation. If you are ever going to take her down, now is the time." I think I'm not alone that a lot of people try to imagine the conversations that happened as a result of that text, where people thought that what would be put into play next was a good idea. But essentially, this is how it went down. Steve Weimer, again, he's eBay's chief communications officer, he forwarded CEO Devin Wenig's text to a guy named Jim Baugh. Now, Baugh was the senior director of safety and security at eBay. And Steve Weimer also added his 2 cents. In a text, he referred to Ina Steiner as a, quote, biased troll who needs to get burned down. Burned down is in all caps. Weimer added, "I want to see ashes, as long as it takes whatever it takes."
That the victims were targeted because eBay executives were unhappy with the coverage of eBay on the couple's website. eBay executives were not merely unhappy with the victims' coverage, they were enraged. One of those executives texted that he wanted to, quote, crush this lady, unquote, referring to the woman in the couple who ran the site. And another told Baugh, his subordinate, to, quote, take her down, unquote.
Now, this doesn't explain what happened next, but it does give a little bit of context. Jim Baugh, if you're tracking, he's the senior director of safety and security at eBay. But before that, he worked for high-profile executives and the CIA. When he first came to eBay, he was a bodyguard for the CEO, Devin Wenig, and then he was promoted to run eBay's security unit. So after these text messages, Baugh mobilized a team whose main objective was to launch a terror campaign against the Steiners, specifically designed to break the couple psychologically in an effort to get them to stop reporting against eBay.
It was a systematic campaign fueled by the resources of a Fortune 500 company to emotionally and psychologically terrorize this middle-aged couple in Natick, with the goal of deterring them from writing bad things online about eBay.
Days later, the team, including eBay's Director of Global Resiliency, David Harville, and multiple other employees and contractors, began phase 1 of Baugh's 3-week terror campaign against the Steiners.
The harassment scheme had 3 phases: sending disturbing deliveries to the couple's home in Natick day and night, sending the couple anonymous, threatening messages online, and actual physical surveillance in the Boston area.
Phase 1 began a few days after Ina's post. An eBay employee created a fake Twitter account and sent threatening message to Ina to stop writing about eBay. The team also doxed the Steiners, posting their home address online, and created fake ads on Craigslist, inviting strangers to their house for late-night sexual encounters.
On August 18th, just after midnight, the defendants posted a classified ad on Craigslist, purportedly from the couple, inviting singles, couples, and swingers, quote-unquote, to their house to party after 10 p.m. each night. People were encouraged to knock on the couple's door at any time, day and night.
Phase 2 of the plan began around mid-August, so a couple of weeks after Ina's original post. The team began ordering a series of packages which were delivered to the Steiners' home. So the Steiners are opening these packages. One of them is a pig mask from the horror movie Saw. Another is a live shipment of hundreds of cockroaches, a funeral wreath, fly larvae, live spiders, and after that funeral wreath was delivered, a book on surviving the death of a spouse. But the Steiners also received a call, and the person on the other end of the line said they couldn't fulfill the order for the wet specimen. David asked, "What's a wet specimen?" and found out it was a pig fetus.
Starting in August 2019, Baugh directed Pop and Zay and others to set up anonymous email accounts, cell phones, and internet connections, and use them to send harassing and disturbing deliveries to the victim's home, all paid for with prepaid debit cards. These deliveries included fly larvae and live spiders, a box of live cockroaches, a sympathy wreath on the occasion of the death of a loved one, a book of advice on how to survive the death of a spouse, pornography mailed to their next-door neighbors but in the couple's names, a Halloween mask featuring the face of a bloody pig, and a pig fetus which was ordered but after an inquiry by the supplier, thankfully was never sent. The messages, laced with profanity, took credit for the deliveries and were intended to look like messages from people who actually sell on eBay and who disapproved of the couple's website's coverage of the company. I'll give you a mild example, one from a Twitter private message to the couple on August 7th, 2019, saying, quote, "What it going to take for you to answer me? Guess I'm going to have to get your attention another way, bitch." Close quote. Another tweet on August 10th came 14 minutes after the bloody pig mask was delivered to their residence. It said in all caps, quote, "Do I have your attention now?"
The plan was to terrify the Steiners, and it worked. But from the very beginning, the couple called their local police. In fact, every time a delivery was made, they continued to call the police, who would continue to come over to their house. And they took the Steiners seriously, but they also kind of thought maybe it was just a prank, because there was no proof as to who was doing this. Now, going on behind the scenes, the next level of the terror was put into place. So eBay's head of security and its director of global resiliency, they flew from California to Boston to stake out the Steiners' home. The team rented cars and drove to the Steiners' suburban neighborhood and also to the local hardware store where they bought tools, planning to break into the couple's home and place a GPS tracker on their car.
Included trying to break into the couple's garage so they could install a GPS on their car. Before the trip, Baugh and others practiced installing a GPS on a Toyota RAV4 in the eBay parking lot.
Now, over the 3 weeks that this terror campaign is happening, and that the Steiners are calling the police constantly, with every new package that's being delivered, the Steiners are recording it, because what the eBay employees didn't know was that they had a really great security system, cameras positioned in front of their home so that they could observe what was going on outside from the inside. And they saw and began tracking these unfamiliar vehicles that were passing and kind of idling in front of their home or just like a little ways back. So they had this idea that they were being watched, but they still didn't know who it was. One day, David Steiner drove away from his house and he spotted an SUV, believing it was tailing him. He pulled over, and as it passed him, he took photographs of this car's license plate. Then the Steiners immediately called the police with the number, and investigators were able to trace that SUV to a rental car company. From there, they learned that the car had been delivered to a Ritz-Carlton and that an eBay employee had signed for the car using a corporate credit card. So local Natick police dug in further. They got the security footage from the hotel, which showed that Jim Baugh, eBay's head of global security, and other staff had flown in from California. Putting two and two together with the rental cars, it was clear that they were stalking the Steiners. Because when an investigator with the Natick Police Department called the eBay employee related to the car rental, they explained that an investigation was underway and that they wanted to interview eBay employees. It was at that point that Baugh and his team began deleting digital evidence and actually attempted to offer local police a false investigative lead, trying to blame fictional hackers.
Following weeks of this, Baugh next set in motion a strategy to manipulate the couple into believing that eBay was reaching out to help them stop. This was an effort to earn the couple's trust by having one of the defendants, Brian Gilbert, call them as a representative of eBay and offer help in investigating the harassment campaign, which of course was being orchestrated by the defendants themselves. Gilbert called the victims on August 21st. Based on the complaint, he reported back to other co-defendants that they, quote, are totally rattled, unquote, and had referred Gilbert to the Natick police. He observed that while one of the victims was, quote, a bitch, unquote, the other was more receptive to his call. By the end of August 2019, the defendants, now aware that the Natick Police Department was investigating, turned their attention to deceiving the police. They allegedly fabricated internal eBay documents to create the appearance that for some time eBay had been concerned about seemingly crazy online criticism on the couple's website, including the false allegation that the couple had threatened the company's CEO. Further, as part of their strategy to manipulate and control the situation, defendant Gilbert also offered to talk to the Natick PD to, of course, supposedly offer eBay's assistance. When Gilbert met with the police, he allegedly lied to them about the origin of the harassment campaign and his involvement in it. At one point, when several of the defendants feared that the Natick police might trace the harassment campaign back to California, they compiled a list of people living in the Santa Clara area who they might be able to frame for the harassment activity if needed. Defendant Baugh directed Stephanie Popp and Stephanie Stockwell to find suitable candidates in the Santa Clara area. Later, it's alleged the defendants also lied to eBay's in-house lawyers who were trying to figure out what was going on. Defendants Harville and Popp were interviewed by phone, both lying about their involvement. Popp then allegedly sat in on the phone interviews of other co-defendants to coach them about what to say to the in-house lawyers at eBay. Finally, to complete the picture, the group allegedly tried to delete all text and social media messages related to the scheme, but as you'll see in the complaint, failed to do so. This was a determined, systematic effort by senior employees of a major company to destroy the lives of a couple in Natick, all because they published content the company executives didn't like. For a while, they succeeded, psychologically devastating these victims for weeks as they desperately tried to figure out what was going on and stop it.
At this point, the Natick police reached out to the FBI for assistance. And at the same time, eBay's legal team got involved. They launched their own internal investigation, which would lead to the termination of the involved employees in September of 2019. So this all happened really fast. In fact, CEO Devin Wenig resigned from eBay that same month, but he was paid a $57 million exit package. 10 months later, the U.S. Attorney in Massachusetts, Andrew Lelling, announced indictments of the former employees and contractors from eBay.
Jim Baugh, eBay's former senior director of safety and security, is being sought by federal agents in California Well, David Harville, eBay's former director of global resiliency, was arrested this morning in New York City. They were charged with conspiracy to commit cyberstalking and conspiracy to tamper with an investigation. 4 other co-conspirators, all of whom worked at eBay, were also charged with the same crimes. Stephanie Pop, Stephanie Stockwell, Veronica Zay, and Brian Gilbert, who notably is a former police captain with the Santa Clara, California Police Department.
In September of 2022, 7 people who worked for eBay's safety and security unit, which included 2 former cops, pleaded guilty to federal criminal charges for their roles in the cyberstalking and harassment campaign of the Steiners. In January of 2024, eBay entered into a deferred prosecution agreement where they agreed to pay a $3 million criminal penalty for terrorizing the couple. But no criminal charges have ever been filed against eBay's top executives. But it wasn't over. By then, the Steiners had filed a civil lawsuit against eBay in July of 2021. Here's criminal defense attorney Rosemary Scapiccio at a press conference.
And David Steiner. They were the victims of eBay's horrific plan to stalk and intimidate them, to prevent them from doing their job as journalists. Today, we filed a lawsuit here in the federal courthouse to hold all those defendants who were responsible for stalking and intimidating and threatening to kill the Steiners accountable. Now, this incident started almost 2 years ago, in August of 2019, when eBay and its employers, and I just want to make clear what's happening here. These were, the directives in this case came from the top. The directives in this case to stalk the Steiners and intimidate the Steiners came from the top management of eBay. And when I say directives, what happened in this case is that they understood exactly what their role was. They assembled an army, they riled up their troops, and then they gave directives to their troops. And these are some of the directives that they gave to these troops, talking about the Steiners, who were journalists, and they didn't happen to like what they had to say. They said, we're going to crush this lady. We're going to do everything we can to take her down. Now's the time. Take her down. Burn her down. I want to see ashes. As long as it takes, whatever it takes, we have to stop her. That's what they said about a member of the press who was doing her job. And what happened when they gave those directives to their employees? Exactly what they knew would happen. Those employees carried out those directives in a manner that was horrific, in a manner that was so arbitrary, in a manner that was intended to intimidate and harm the Steiners. What did they do after they got those directives? They sent live spiders to the Steiners. They sent cockroaches, live cockroaches to the Steiners. They sent a wreath, a funeral wreath, in Ina Steiner's name to communicate that they were willing to take every step necessary to stop her reporting, and they threatened to kill her. And when that wasn't enough, when they didn't get the reaction that they wanted, and Ina Steiner wouldn't stop reporting, they sent a book entitled Surviving the Death of a Spouse to David Steiner to give him the message, shut your wife down or else. And that was the clear message that they were sending, because that was the directive from the top of eBay management in this case. And it didn't end there. After they sent these death threats, they also sent a Saw mask. And if any of you have seen Saw, it's the mask that the suspect wears before he kidnaps, tortures, and kills his subjects. They sent that to the Steiners. It wasn't a joke. This wasn't a mistake. This was a message, loud and clear. Stop reporting or else.
Ina and David Steiner.
I would say the most troubling thing is that being at home and not feeling safe, looking out the window and thinking there were evil people lurking out there.
We have 8 security cameras around our house now. We have door alarms that sound every time we open the front and back doors. We take circuitous routes anytime we go places. We're very aware of people around us, and we drive with a video camera in the rear window of our car to make sure that no one is tailing us. Yeah, it's had a lasting impact.
If I could just jump in here, I think what eBay did has has forever changed the Steiners and who they are as people, who they are as a couple, and who they are as a company. Ina is a reporter. Her job was to go and get sources and get stories. If you're concerned about everyone you're interacting with, that's a problem. And just so we're clear, what the employees and the defendants in this case, the employees of eBay and the defendants did in this case, is that when they knew they were caught, and they sent each other funny texts with each other like, oh, our operation is working. They're seeing ghosts. They're calling the police every 10 minutes. They were mocking the Steiners for reacting to the terror that they themselves instilled. And what did they do when they found out that the Natick police had traced a license plate that David was able to capture of a car that was following them? They got together and they planned to blame it on the Steiners. Let's open up a person of interest file and make them look crazy so that the Natick police won't believe them and we can gain some credibility. And when that wasn't enough, they actually reached out to the Steiners. They called Ina Steiner and they said, hi, we're from eBay and we're here to help about this problem that you're having. Will you be willing to talk to us? They actually did that. They created it, they executed it, they knew it was happening, and then they tried to use the Steiners as the scapegoats. And that's the corporate accountability that we're up against right now. And that's what's got to change.
Just last week, on July 27th, it was announced that eBay and several of its former top executives had agreed to pay a $55.7 million settlement to the Steiners. But in this case, unlike in most corporate resolutions, there's no confidentiality provision, which means the Steiners can speak freely about the details of their payout. $2 million of it will actually come out of the pocket of former CEO Devin Winnick. $6 million from the settlement will also go to charities that protect free speech. Up next on our Criminal Mischief bonus content, my co-host Brandon Morgan and I will discuss this case, but also a bombshell announcement related to the Idaho murders. If you'll recall, Brian Kohberger, back in July of 2025, confessed to the murders of 4 University of Idaho students. He took a plea deal to escape the death penalty, admitting that he was guilty of the murders. However, last week, Kohberger filed a petition for what's called post-conviction relief, arguing that his conviction should now be overturned. He now claims he had ineffective legal representation and alleges he was convinced to falsely confess to murders he didn't commit. So we're going to get into it. And remember, our bonus content is available every week in our Criminal Mischief feed after each episode. So join us there so we can continue the conversation. And as always, thanks for listening. From Pie in the Sky Media, Criminal Mischief is an EVO production, recorded live in the beautiful Pacific Northwest. We're produced by Brandon Morgan and myself, music by Soundstripe. For EVO Creative, I'm Carolyn Ossorio, your writer and host.